We are live. We are live.
Hey.
I'm in Callicoon, and welcome to the Substack Live for our freak show this week. We have as our guest here Cameron Stevenson, who is Courier's correspondent in Washington. He's coming to us live from Phoenix, and he's been doing some fantastic work on the Epstein mysteries in the working with various sources in Washington. He has, in addition to his work at Courier, he's teaching multimedia journalism at the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communication at Arizona State University. Yay! I teach at NYU journalism. We want to keep those young people still thinking about truth telling in this
Yeah.
society that we're in. So today, thank you for joining everybody. Today, we are going to talk about a subject that we know is on everybody's mind, except for maybe House Speaker Mike Johnson and the Republican congressman who he sent home early because, well, they really don't want us to be thinking about Jeffrey Epstein, the Jeffrey Epstein case, the conspiracy theory that their people were obsessed with. They were obsessed with the notion that a pedophile elite would put an autocrat in power and weaponize the government. They were worried that that was going to happen, and now here we are in the situation where we have a member of the elite in power, acting like an autocrat and weaponizing the government to, I believe, I think we all agree to hide the elite's involvement in the still mysterious Epstein case. So both Cameron and I have been doing a lot of work on the various things that are going on in terms of the investigation or the non-investigation in Washington. And what I'd like to do is just start with Cameron's work regarding we know that there are DOJ. There's a cache of information at the DOJ, right? We know that there are hundreds of thousands of pages of
Yes.
documents.
Yeah.
And we know that they have not denied, I think, or have they, that the FBI, that somebody at the top ordered the FBI, 1,000 agents working in 24-hour shifts to investigate, to look through these files, and eventually to start flagging mentions of Donald Trump. And that mobilization of 1,000 FBI agents in 24-hour shifts, it can only really be compared to things like after 9/11 or after January 6th. It's an epic reaction to something, and in this case, it was to protect the president from possible political embarrassment or possible criminal investigations. So that's in the
It-
DOJ. Talk to me about what you have found out about what's going on with those documents, and will we ever see them, given that they've
yeah,
now flagged all this material?
right. Well, and what I think is really interesting is that even though, Senator Durbin announced that this undertaking had been going on where 1,000 FBI agents were sequestered into this, New York office for weeks, pouring through documents, putting together a spreadsheet of every mention of not just Trump, but any other prominent, prolific figure related to the Epstein investigation. This was actually reported on back in March, but it was in the framing and context of this is something that Bondi's doing to appeal to the far right, to the MAGA base. This is so incompetent. This is just a sign of the incompetent administration. And while it was a very unsecure way for them to do this, its purpose wasn't just to appeal to the base. It was one, to protect Trump, because after they found his name everywhere, they cataloged it, they redacted his name. Those shortly after this spreadsheet was put together of everyone who was mentioned, Todd Blanche, which, as you know, is currently one of the leaders of the Department of Justice. Before that, he started his own law firm so that he could represent Donald Trump's criminal cases. The he was in, I believe, three of the cases.
Yeah, he was a U.S. attorney. He was a federal prosecutor, like many of these guys are, and then he became a private attorney, and he actually defended Paul Manafort before he did this.
Right. So this
Yeah.
guy, who's, I mean, he has his MAGA bona fides, I guess. He was put as deputy at the Department of Justice. This spreadsheet with everyone's name was put together, and suddenly he was sent to have a private meeting with Ghislaine Maxwell in her maximum security prison, where she said, or her lawyer said, that they went over at least 100 names.
Hmm.
Shortly after that, she also said, I didn't have anything bad to say about Trump. She was put into a lower security prison, and now she's being given the opportunity to play with dogs, and there's the potential for work release, and she's been kind of getting a cushy deal out of this.
Right.
As far as
The playing with dogs thing is, as a side note, I think that because she had a sex trafficking conviction, I think there was some rule that you couldn't actually play with dogs in the maximum in this prison that she was in before.
well, I guess
Okay.
you got to draw the line somewhere.
Yeah, yeah. So, okay, so basically, what you're saying is that we think that this spreadsheet of Trump's mentions, and of this list of names was brought down by Todd Blanche to the prison in Tallahassee before Ghislaine was moved into the camp-fed luxurious prison, or
That's
whatever you want to call it.
right.
And that's so that was one of the uses of this list that they put together. But this spreadsheet of Trump mentions, what happens to that? What happens to those documents that are flagged? What do you think is going on with them right now?
Yeah, well, by all accounts that we have, they are incredibly unsecure. They didn't go through any confidentiality. There were people who had eyes on them and who had access to the files who probably shouldn't have. They've also been just tampered with to high heaven. So I don't know if there's a, you know, pure file, so to speak, and
Hmm.
then these other altered, updated, redacted ones. Those ones are the ones that could, get leaked. I don't know
Hmm.
how much more information they would have, or not to say that this would happen, but it's the Trump administration, so not to say that it wouldn't. But that sort of a leak could also be weaponized. We're
Hmm.
already seeing the House committee, based on what has been found. They have subpoenaed Bill Clinton. They subpoenaed, former Department of Justice officials. They subpoenaed a few Republicans. Bill Barr. They can throw him under the bus. He's familiar with the territory, but but those files seem like they can be weaponized and used to hurt Trump's political opponents while insulating himself, which is why I've been looking more into something that can't be as easily tampered with, which is financial documents.
Yeah, tell us about that, because that basically we're talking about two different caches of information that is right now controlled by the Trump regime, but is actually in two different areas of the government. So, talk to us about these financial records.
Yeah, so this is something really, really interesting. And I think this is where any potential justice can really be found. I mean, Epstein was very wealthy and he worked with wealthy individuals, and they weren't walking around giving each other sacks of cash. They use banks, they have accounts, they have shell corporations. And all of these have financial transactions that link them to each other, that link them to his victims, that link him to the Eastern European, agencies where they were able to find women to traffic. And yeah, exactly. Senator Ron Wyden's been working on that. He's actually been working on it since shortly after Epstein was arrested. It's something that has recently been in the news because there's a lot of scrutiny around the Trump administration and Epstein right now. But Senator Wyden at the Finance Committee has been looking into Epstein's finances for years. He's found thousands of transactions, of wire transfer transactions between Epstein banks and Eastern European banks that have been sanctioned because they deal with trafficking. They go to other clients, and these are documents that are being held at the U.S. Treasury that Wyden was working on obtaining access for. The Biden administration, because Biden was very procedural. We need to follow the rules, ABC. He wanted them to issue a subpoena to access those documents. Uh, the Senate has been controlled by Republicans since this investigation got to the point where it needed a subpoena, and Republicans have been blocking that ever since. And now the Trump administration has taken that even farther.
I mean, you wrote this. This was a 4-year congressional investigation into the assets of Jeffrey Epstein, and that it's been stalled indefinitely by the Trump administration, which has revoked access to these documents. That the Biden administration had actually been allowing this committee to look at, and
Yes.
that's yes, and
Yeah.
that's the status right now because the Republicans control these committees and the Republicans control these executive agencies, so they can just lock it all down.
Right.
Um, is
And,
there
and sorry, I would like to add that they are using this very effectively to control the narrative on it. You'll notice that the Senate committee isn't allowing Wyden to issue subpoenas for his investigation because that could implicate other Republicans or wealthy donors or the billionaire class. Whereas the House is able to use the tampered with Department of Justice files to issue subpoenas against Trump's political opponents or people who seeks retribution against. And because that's allowed to go forward, that's given legitimacy. Whereas the other one, it's legitimate, but it's not being given the weight of a congressional investigation that it deserves.
um the there's a question that came in that's sort of interesting. I've not thought about it. Is it possible that anybody at the Supreme Court would have been in some way implicated in the Epstein situation, and that that's the ultimate backstop to opening up this material if it ever gets back into Democratic control?
Yeah, I personally haven't seen. Actually, I take that back. There's one connection to the Supreme Court that I've seen, and that is the one of the previous Supreme Court justices. His son worked at Deutsche Bank.
Yeah,
I believe he retired during Trump's first
It
term.
was Kennedy. Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
Kennedy's son worked Deutsche Bank. He specifically worked with Epstein
yeah,
and has moved on to other banks that Epstein had accounts with.
yeah.
And so, I mean, that's the only direct connection. I haven't seen anything where any sitting Supreme Court justices were involved with Epstein per se. But that's not to say that they aren't involved, you know, tangentially through donors or through wealthy contributors. I mean, we all know that Clarence Thomas, he loves his gifts from billionaires, and if they need something in return, I'm sure they know how to get a hold of them.
Speaking of billionaires and people loving their gifts, talk to me a little bit about Leon Black and the connection to Epstein, and who is Leon Black in terms of this U.S. Virgin Islands Epstein Island uh, financing.
Yeah, Leon Black's a really interesting figure because most people have never heard of him. He's a Wall Street executive, a billionaire who made tons of money in Wall Street. And as such, most of the reporting about him, even in relation to Epstein, is from financial reporters. And
Mhm.
so it's very bogged down in financial jargon that I feel kind of buries the lead with him, which is that he gave hundreds of millions of dollars to Epstein over the years. He overpaid Epstein for tax and estate planning services, like vastly overpaid. Like Epstein, despite his reputation as a financier, he was a college dropout, a failed substitute teacher. He wasn't an accountant. He wasn't accredited or had anything that made him special. And in fact, Leon Black's attorneys have later said that the things Epstein did, they had they had to have actual tax accountants go in and fix it because it was so shoddy. But despite that, Leon Black paid Epstein 100 million plus dollars to
Mhm.
for yeah, allegedly, as the transactions say, for these services. What Senator Ron Wyden is looking at is that because those services weren't actually rendered, that this could be tax fraud. that they were committing tax fraud. He was lying about what he was paying him for. And in fact, Leon Black has since there was a lawsuit against him by the U.S. Virgin Islands because of his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. It didn't go to court. He settled out of court. He gave the islands $62.5 million. And in this lawsuit, he admitted that he knew that that money went to fund Epstein's island in the Virgin Islands, where all the sex trafficking kind of flowed in and out of. And so he admitted this. He paid money for it. It settled out of court, so it didn't do anything as far as tangible criminal consequences. But that's another avenue where we can see that these wealthy people who were associated with Epstein knew what was going on, helped facilitate it. They found ways in the tax code to make it seem like they were paying for other things. And because it's a white collar crime and they're rich, they got away with it up in so far.
And so far, they've gotten away with it. I think Wyden has asked the IRS to investigate Epstein, or that the Democrats have previously asked the IRS to look into Black and look into this potential fraud, and the IRS is ignoring that. Am I right?
Yes. Yeah.
Um,
They ignored it during Epstein's entire life. They ignored it when the banks finally, very, very late, reported that Epstein
a-
had a lot of suspicious
after
activity.
Epstein's death is when they started forking that over. Oh, wait,
Right.
we forgot to file a SAR, and we forgot to file hundreds of SARs. Actually, there were billions of dollars being moved through our bank, right?
Yeah. We have laws, believe it or
Yeah,
not,
but they
specifically
waited
to.
until they waited until the spotlight was on them.
Right.
Um,
It didn't matter because it was making them money. They didn't care where the money
right,
was coming from. And
right,
even when they filed it, there's been no investigation. Wyden has asked again for an investigation for the IRS to audit these finances. And 2 weeks after he did, Trump fired the IRS chief.
all right, let's step back a little bit, Cameron, and look at this sort of from an aerial point of view, from the conspiracy theory that animated MAGA, that really is at the core of QAnon, and the idea that, again, child eating pedophiles, elites are in cahoots with each other, and in cahoots with the government, and that the government is weaponizing itself to protect them. Um, Epstein dies in 2019. Biden comes in 21. And they have all these years where they've got this information about him. They've got the potential to start looking into this stuff. And you've got this bubbling conspiracy theory out here that's just being fed. It's the juice, really, of the MAGA movement that,
Yeah.
the elites, right, are doing this, and that the Democrat elites are doing this. And that's why we need that quote unquote client list, this mythical list that supposedly is going to reveal all these liberal, progressive, child molesters. Um, Trump kind of went along with that for a long time. It was good for him, right?
It was advantageous.
But what's so amazing about it is, we were doing research into their relationship, which a lot of people have done timelines. CNN just released one yesterday that is really good, and it's got some new information. But one of the things we found was that, Trump was part of this group of progressive liberal people. I mean, he wasn't one of them. He wasn't on there. Obviously, we know he gave money to Hillary Clinton. He gave money to anybody. He's talked about it to his Democrats, but he was really part of this demi-monde in the 1980s, 90s Manhattan, which included, some on the left, or, nominally rich people who were maybe giving money to Democrats. But in this case, the Democrats did not. This client list that's supposedly out there is actually, it's always been out there. It's been out there since Ghislaine Maxwell's pay settlement of the defamation case from Virginia Giuffre, which I'm assuming some of our listeners know about. It's one of Epstein's primary victims, who then talked to the Daily Mail, I think, and the Daily Mail. This was the breaking of the story, and then they called Ghislaine Maxwell, who was the madam, and Ghislaine Maxwell said she's a liar, and Virginia Giuffre said, "No, I'm not," and she filed a lawsuit, a defamation lawsuit in New York that dragged on for a while, and then the Ghislaine Maxwell settled it without admitting guilt. And then literally I think it was within 48 hours of the judge unsealing this 900-page deposition and records in that defamation case in August of 2019 that Epstein dies in prison. The timing is incredible, and I remember it because
It
I
was the
was one
day
of the
after, wasn't
reporters.
it?
I think it was within 24 hours. And I remember it because it was kind of the first time I jumped into the reporting on it. And I had this document in front of me, and as did everyone else who was paying attention. And we were pouring through it and looking for names and looking for, just filled with mind boggling deposition um, statements from like Epstein's houseman, witnessing this horrible, these billionaire New Yorkers coming through from an island with their Swedish au pair who had like was in terror. They had taken her passport away. She was shivering. This is one of the trafficked kids. I mean, I'm not going to name the people who were in there, but they're all in this document, and um, it was all out there. And what happened was, I think the hope on the right in the MAGA world was that all of these people are on the left. They're all progressives. They're all liberals, and that once Trump gets in, they can just open the records and it's all going to come spilling out. Well, in fact, a lot of it already was out there. And this client list, if you had, we already had the black book with 1,000 names that Ghislaine Maxwell maintained
Right.
with home numbers of everyone: Larry Summers, Clinton, Bill Gates, and Trump, and Trump's all over it, right? So what's fascinating about this is that the hubris of Trump, that he would just go along with this, knowing he has to know his memory isn't that far gone. He had to know that like Ghislaine Maxwell was introducing him to Jeffrey Epstein's girls. I mean, it's
Right.
there there's material in the government files that we may never see, but there's actually a lot of information about Trump's interactions with Epstein in the tabloids from that period, because they were writing about their parties that they went to and the women that he was dating. And we came across an item where he was reported in the British papers that he was dating this young British model who had just turned 20, introduced to him by Ghislaine Maxwell, who then later on in, the after times, was one of these girls who talked to Dateline, I think it was, and said, "Yeah, Epstein trafficked me. I was a teenager, raped and trafficked me." And in this tabloid article, it's literally a month later, and Ghislaine Maxwell is introducing this young girl a month after she's gotten away from Epstein, introducing this girl to Trump, who's then moved her into the Trump Tower, and she's his girlfriend for a while. So this is like all out there in the tabloid world. And if that's in the tabloids, just imagine what's in those documents in the Justice Department.
Yeah. Well, and I think that point actually really speaks to why this whole thing has caught Trump so off guard and why he's so unable to maintain this narrative is he has famously gone and done what's called catch and kill with the tabloids,
Yes,
where they go to him with stories first and say, "Hey, this might be bad. Do you want to buy it from us?" And the ones that he actually thinks are damaging, he buys. Those ones he didn't care about. He doesn't think. I personally think that he does not believe what he has been doing is a crime. I reported on this yesterday that his obsession with trying teens as adults, is what's been going on in DC, is part of his mentality that in his mind, anyone who has hit puberty is an adult, and that means they're fair game in the law, in dating, in every sense. And so I think in his like whatever personal convictions he has, he doesn't think that there's anything wrong with that. He thinks that that's cool, and he's picking up chicks, and
absolutely,
and
absolutely.
so that's why this
Yeah,
is just baffling to him. Is he's like, no, I wasn't doing anything with kids. I was with models and these beautiful young women. Um,
absolutely. Yeah,
And
but the
it's
hubris of allowing this conspiracy notion to go on when it was his buddy, and the buddy ship ended not because of he blurted out in his Tourette's sort of way. He blurts out that, well, he was stealing my staff, and we know Virginia Giuffre, Virginia Robertson, was a towel girl at Mar-a-Lago, and she becomes the number one victim for a decade. So he blurts that out, but the real reason that they fell at odds with each other and stopped being pals is, according to Michael Wolff, who spent many, many years interviewing Epstein before he died, is that Epstein and Trump were fighting over a property that they wanted to buy in Palm Beach. This,
yeah,
a mansion that uh, Trump ended up buying and then upselling to this Russian oligarch, Rabovlev, for like I don't know, $80 million more than he paid for it.
right. Yeah. Well,
In
I
like
think
typical sort of Russian money laundering fashion, suddenly there's, Rabovlev has decided this Trump property is worth, orders of magnitude more than what he paid for it. And that's the deal that Epstein was cut out of. And now they're not pals anymore.
right.
And
And
he
that just
knows all that. He knows that he lived this life. And yet he let this thing simmer on and let this QAnon thing go forward. And I mean, maybe he had no control over it, but it's, to me, like, again, when you step back and look at it sort of from an aerial view, it just boggles the mind that it's almost like it was the best psyop ever, that you took, one of the villains of this story and made people believe that he was the savior sent to earth. I mean, that's what the MAGA evangelicals think, to protect children from these horrible pedophiles and horrible elites. But in fact, those were his pals and he was in that society. He was
yeah.
part of the
Well,
demo.
it
How does
almost
that happen? How do you do that to millions of Americans?
well,
I know we're
it
getting off
honestly,
track here, but
no, I think it goes to to the conspiracy-based mindset. There's nothing inherently wrong with pursuing conspiracy theories. But it's the difference between the conspiracy theory that Epstein was using these wire transfers to send money to Europe and to send money to get money from his clients and facilitate through the Virgin Islands. That hasn't been proven in courts. It's a theory, and it's straightforward and not very entertaining, I guess. It's money. Whereas the idea that this super wealthy billionaire who built a business and had a TV show where he fired people is secretly part of this underground i- initiative to uproot this elite cabal of child molesters, and he's fighting against all odds, and yet he's strong and powerful, and he was thrown out of office and brought back in. It's this hero's tale that is not grounded in reality at all, but very compelling. And when you're on these dark corners of the internet typing up these fictions, you can make it seem very romanticized, and people latch onto that. And it's just storytelling, I guess.
well, they've lapped it up, and now here we are. Okay, prediction. We only have a few more minutes left. Uh, the House comes back in a couple weeks, right? I don't know what day, but in September, I guess. And what do you think's going to happen? And what are the options that the Democrats have for addressing or essentially keeping this pot on the boil?
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is that Republicans have given them an opportunity if they'll take it. So one of the House committees, they did issue subpoenas to Bill Clinton, to William Barr, to some, lesser known but still prominent people who were involved in prosecution in the Department of Justice throughout the Epstein saga. Those they are supposed to start reporting and showing up at the House for depositions. I believe August 19th is the date for the first one. I mean,
Well, that's next
I
week.
yeah, yeah, yeah. The House, this committee's meeting specifically for these depositions. I don't know if the depositions are public or if they're closed door, but that's what's on the calendar. Now, if they're closed door, it's hard to get much out of it, except for what the people behind those doors say. But Democrats do have an opportunity to keep this in the conversation, to get information that's in those meetings to the public before it gets manipulated by, I guess, just Trump loyalists who are doing this as a way to create a shield around him. So I think that's the most immediate one. The next thing is Wyden does have some tools at his disposal in the committee where he can continue his investigation. I'm trying to get information from them that they have accessed at the Treasury. It's very confidential stuff, so it's a matter of getting access.
So for now, we have to rely on leakers and journalists who are able to extract this kind of information. There's actually nothing that we can do to get that out. Like the Wall Street Journal did get the birthday message, the birthday book, and
Right.
we don't know yet who that came from. We may never know unless Trump's lawsuit, what is it, a $10 billion lawsuit against Rupert Murdoch, unless they go to actually to the mat and make them say who gave it to them. I don't
Right.
think I don't think they really want to know, because I think Michael Wolff was reporting that the White House thinks it was Ghislaine Maxwell's people who turned that over as a kind of like, because
That
she's trying to get the pardon, and
Yeah,
they were
squeaky
originally
wheel.
saying no, you can't. The government, the Trump DOJ was actually I think saying to
Huh.
the Supreme Court, we don't want her to take this case to the court. That was before all this started to blow open, right? They
So that was
resisted
her
it, and then they sent
wedge to
Todd
get
Blanche
in.
down to talk to her. But it's almost like they were holding out a little. Okay, you really want to play hardball? Here's a little bit of what we have, and that's why Todd Blanche had to race down there, because who knows what she has and what, if you were her. I mean, I did a 3-part documentary on her. I know actually quite a bit about her, which we can talk about at some other time. But,
Love to.
she had a lot of information. She has a lot of money from Epstein that she stashed away. And if you were her and you were sitting, we always were wondering, like, well, when is she going to trade something? But they
Right.
probably at that point didn't care about trading information for a more lenient sentence. Uh, but now she wants to get out of there. She wants to go home to the villa in France that her family has waiting for her, right? She's European. So they probably, before she went off to prison, wouldn't you hand off all of your stash to your lawyers and your family members and say, if anything happens to me, I don't know. I certainly think that's what I would do. And that, now she's got Todd Blanche, and she's got a direct line to the president. And I mean, I don't know what you think, but my guess is that they're not going to pardon her while he is still. It's certainly not before the midterms. But it would be my guess that it would be one of those pardons that he would issue the day before he leaves office, but maybe
Yeah. Well,
before. I don't know.
I think it's really contingent on how he can get information from her to either
Yes,
attack
that's
political
right.
enemies and insulate himself. So I think
That's right.
if these
Yeah,
House investigations are politicized, which they are, but if they are able to manipulate those in a way that changes public perception in Trump's favor and hurts his enemies, then
yeah.
I mean that would be an avenue to reward her. But he's also not known for rewarding people at all. I mean, ask Michael Cohen.
Right, right,
He'll
right.
hang you out to dry when he gets what he wants. So
Right,
it's
right.
a
But at the
dangerous
moment,
game to play.
he's got personal lawyers in the DOJ who are doing that for him, who are less inclined to behave the way he does.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
they need to protect him. They all need to protect him. I mean, that's the other thing. Everyone is in on this clack of, their kleptocracy, or whatever you want to call it. And no, all of them are implicated in one way or another in what's happening
right.
there. So they can't actually let him go down. Okay, so it's past 1:30, and I am so thrilled to have you on our live show here, and so thrilled that you're moving to Washington. Good luck. If you want to follow Cameron's work, and I highly recommend you do, go and subscribe to Below the Beltway.
Yes.
And you will see some really, really good original reporting. And good luck to you with this. Entering the lockdown nation's capital.
Yeah.
Watch out for men in fatigues. Um,
It's
yeah,
quite a time to get out there. No, thank you so much for having me on. It's been great talking. I'm sure we'll have a lot to discuss
well,
again in the
we should
future.
do it again. Yeah.
Most definitely.
Okay. Well, good luck. Bye,
Thanks.
everybody.
See ya.